Hello, this is Daniel Bridge, the armchair model railroader, and today we're going to be going over the episode 2 of how I would model Grand Central Terminal. So today we're going to get into the nitty gritty of how Grand Central Terminal operates. Uh, a couple days ago, I was explaining to my wife that Grand Central Terminal had a certain design to it that is awfully complicated. This is just a very small version of Grand Central Terminal that I just sketched out very quickly just to show her all of the little bits and pieces of it: the Park Avenue Tunnel, the throat, the express level tracks, the concourse, the arrivals area, the departures area, the mail and the staging areas, the Lexington Avenue Yard, the mystery surrounding track 61, and how many tracks there actually was in the original plan, as far as I can tell from 1909, was 200 tracks. Uh, and the tracks were numbered from 1 through 200, basically starting on the same side of the terminal. This would be the eastern side of the terminal. This would be the north side, west side. 42nd Street would be down here in front of the concourse. And the edge of the yard is pretty much 59th Street, which is right in here. But you can't really talk about Grand Central Terminal until you talk about how or why it was so massive. And one of the things that I talk about, I put it in here twice, is Mott Haven. Mott Haven was a neighborhood in the Bronx. This whole area that I drew here was the Bronx, from Woodlawn to the High Bridge over here. The High Bridge was, I just found out recently that the High Bridge was for most people that know, it's an aqueduct. The reason for it being is an aqueduct across the Harlem River. And the Hudson line ran underneath of it, down around to Mott Haven. And I believe that there was an interchange along this crazy bridge that goes basically offshore of the Harlem River over here, and down and around and underneath the drawbridge for the main line in New York Central Railroad, which was basically the Harlem line coming down here and going across this bridge down Park Avenue to Grand Central Terminal beyond. Every train that came from out of town, basically, that needed provisioning, uh, food, water, linens, all that stuff, it had to come back to Mott Haven for provisions. And Mott Haven was a relatively small yard. It changed over time. Nowadays, you can't even see it at all. The air rights above it were sold off over time, and this part of Mott Haven down here is now a football field for what I believe is a high school. In the 80s, when I would pass by here, I really didn't even pay attention to it. It was all completely covered over with a shopping center and apartment buildings and all kinds of stuff. I do remember very clearly coming from Connecticut and passing through New Rochelle and then over the Bronx River and into Woodlawn. Somewhere right around in here, the overhead power lines ended for the New Haven Railroad, and you went into the third rail um, district of the New York Central, what was the former New York Central. At the time, I just knew that the overhead power lines suddenly ended because, when you're on the train and you see uh, the, the support bridges passing by, all of a sudden they stop. And it was all third rail from there, from this interchange between New Rochelle and Woodlawn all the way down to Grand Central Terminal. I never really knew where that was until I went to research this. Something else I also found out was that the Harlem line was originally its own railroad, and it was the first railroad to go into Manhattan. It used to be an electric trolley line that went all the way down to nearly the tip of Manhattan, uh, somewhere around where the Bowery and Park Avenue came together. So every single train that came into Grand Central Terminal went to Mott Haven and then back again. So this 4-track main line I thought was really busy before was even more busy than I realized until I started looking at this area. And note to self, this whole area around the East River and the Harlem River and all along here, especially this really crazy bridge that blocks off the whole Harlem River coastline right here. I've seen Google images of it this week. It's really crazy how none of the property owners along this part of the Harlem River has access to the river because there's this single track railroad bridge that blocks off the Harlem River on this side. I thought that was very interesting. And so coming up over here and looking at this awfully complex mess, we have this little area here is an abandoned train station at about 59th Street. And then in the throat, a lot of the tracks in the throat are not just numbered, but they're lettered also. Like track A and B go to the lower level ladders, the suburban ladders. And when I was looking at the original 1909 drawings for Grand Central Terminal's track plan, there were even more tracks below track 61. The drawings aren't very consistent here because I was looking at a track plan for Penn Central for Grand Central Terminal, and it shows track 61. It shows all these tracks over here on the Lexington Ave Yard on the upper level, but not on the lower level. And when you look at that lower level, there's about 17 tracks in here on the upper level, the express level, but on the suburban level there's only this one track coming along here that goes back towards the throat. And it's a bit confusing because track 186 through 199 is completely missing from the suburban level. The S stands for suburban, E for express. So on the express level over here in this yard, there's 50 through 65, and the Waldorf Astoria is basically above this whole area here. Before the Waldorf Astoria was there was a coal-fired power plant, and I imagine that this yard was meant to serve that power plant with coal, and I believe the elevator that 61 is associated with, the elevator that can handle a car, was used to carry loads of ash from the power plant down to track 61 to take it out of the city. Surprising fact that I found also is that on the suburban level, there's an arrivals area, because back in 1909, this area over here on this side of the of Grand Central Terminal was for arrivals. And so since trains at that time had a locomotive at the front, it would arrive here and go through the loop underneath the concourse, underneath the Gray Bar building, and then back out again through the Park Avenue Tunnel and back over here to down Park Avenue and back to Mott Haven. And then once they were provisioned, they'd either be stored at Mott Haven or they'd be brought back down here to where there was a staging area here, and then they could pull out into the tunnel and then back down into the departures area, or just come straight back to the departures area. Nowadays, the departures area, which is full of tracks, I mean, this is track 115 goes all the way through the arrivals area, and I've seen a photograph recently of the doorway to track 115 was open, and there was a Metro North train waiting there to depart. So they still use this area over here, the arrivals area, somewhat relatively with frequent use. But most of it has been, most of this arrivals area is now used for the new East Side Access project. It used to be when the, I think it was the Biltmore Hotel, trains arriving at this area could have their luggage taken straight to the Biltmore Hotel, which was above the arrivals area. I saw recently there was a drawing of Terminal City, this whole area here, where the arrivals building was a completely separate structure from the main concourse, even though they were connected underground by passageways, both on the upper level and the lower level. This arrivals building was originally supposed to be a separate building, and a lot of people know from looking through the history of the design of Grand Central Terminal that the original designers had a little spat, and the original design was not carried through. They changed it over time, and so eventually the Biltmore was built there instead of the arrivals building, and the main concourse was just connected to the arrivals area separately. So this is just a very condensed version of Grand Central Terminal's tracks. There's the Biltmore was eventually demolished, and I believe now there's an AT&T building there. The concourse area, the main concourse, everyone knows, is still there. The Gray Bar building is somewhere over here. The mail track is not used anymore. It's mostly just staging over in this area. And the departures area is now just for regular use, both arrivals and departures. They don't need to use this loop anymore. In fact, a lot of this loop is not used at all. When you look at the track plan for Metro North, it does not show that that loop even being completed from the suburban level over to here. I believe that the track ends somewhere right around in here on the lower suburban level. It does not even connect over here, and it doesn't show any of the tracks at all beyond 117 to 125. Those are just not listed at all on that map. I've looked at least 5 or 6 different maps of Grand Central Terminal now, and they jive a little bit. They, between the original 1909 maps and the Metro North maps, there is some similarities, but some of the tracks have obviously not being used anymore. So since I'm going to be modeling 1926, I'd really like to know if the lower level of Lexington Avenue Yard actually had tracks in it after they completed the building of the terminal. I suspect that there's an opening down there underneath the upper level tracks, because in this area right over here, somewhere around 50th Street, south of 50th Street, there was a interlocking tower, underground. Now all that is done on the third floor of the main concourse. But at the time that it was originally built, all the interlocking machines were down at this end of the either here or here, where they actually did all the switching from. They didn't have like TVs or anything like that. It was just light bulbs showing where trains had passed over switches or certain sections of tracks. You know, um, they didn't actually have to see the trains themselves. And also, I'm sure there was a lot of people communicating by phone at that time, or messengers or something analog. There was a very analog way of telling where trains were at the time on either level. And I believe that there were two interlocking machines, one for the upper and one for the lower level. I've never seen the pictures of those interlocking machines. I've never actually seen the pictures of what's going on the third floor of the concourse. I've seen some AI stuff, and it's just stupid. I hate AI. AI train videos, AI slop is just horrible. So this is where I'm at, is mainly doing research on how Grand Central Terminal operates, because even though I've been there many times, how I wanted to model it was not just to show the terminal. Well, originally it was just to show the terminal and the entrance over here to the Park Avenue Tunnel. I was just trying to figure out how I would present this, because I'd like to be able to see the tracks on the upper level. And in 1926, the air rights over the upper level hadn't been sold off yet. The building down here, where I believe it's in just before the throat, there's a building that has these very large arch openings that allow Park Avenue to come back together and go down the center of the street over here. Don't quote me, but I believe it's called the General Building, and it was actually where the offices were for the the New York Central Railroad, and the elevators actually went down to the platform so that executives could get to and from the trains without going through the main concourse like normal people. And also, most buildings built on top of the terminal could not have elevators on the first floor because the tracks were in the way. But they designed it so that their elevators were lined up with the terminal's platforms. Not always an option, especially over here in the staging area underneath the Gray Bar building, because the tracks are very, very close together in that region. And yeah, so there was the furthest over I could see on the suburban level of there being rails on the Penn Central map was about track 130, which I believe lines up with the express level, the upper level of track 6 or track 7, or 5, 6, or 7. Not exactly sure on that one. I haven't been able to find an overlay where both not very accurate anyway, where both levels are overlaid each other. And I have limited resources. I can't really do that on my own. I'm sure that there would be a way to print out the 1909 maps of the upper and lower levels, the express and suburban levels, and lay them on top of each other and be able to see where the tracks line up on the two different levels together. I'm sure it's pretty it was done in a way that both levels are supported correctly, because there's huge skyscrapers above them, and yeah, you know what I'm saying. Somewhere down in the throat area, somewhere down in here, is where I found track 185. It's just a little tiny piece of track that comes off of the suburban level that sort of dead ends right in here. There's a whole bunch of little tracks that dead end up in this little space, like track 127 and 125, both sort of dead end in here. And I'm not really sure what they were used for. I've come up with different thoughts on what they were used for, but I do want to make sure that I keep those little spurs in my model. The way that I plan on modeling this, let me go back to a previous image. So if you saw my video from last week, the way I was thinking about modeling this or displaying it was showing the upper level and the lower level with enough separation between them so that a person standing next to the layout could see the upper level and also view the lower level. And there would be a staging yard here for the lower level. Excuse me. And another staging yard hidden inside of the Park Avenue tunnel, so that you could see trains disappearing down here inside the throat, but it wouldn't actually be a physical ramp connecting the Park Avenue tunnel down to the suburban lower level of the terminal. And the way I've envisioned it is that the tracks, you'll all be able to see the tracks. The tracks will be everywhere. This is how I believe it's 97th Street. It might be 96th or 95th, where the Park Avenue main line goes into the Park Avenue tunnel. And so this was all covered on my previous video. Well, thank you for watching. My name is Daniel Bridge. I'm the Armchair Model Railroader, and I will be continuing on next week with another episode of how I would model Grand Central Terminal. Thank you for watching.